Now, I don't know about you, I heard a United Methodist bishop, which is the tribe that I come from with Methodists, once say that hell is eternally 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I appreciate your willingness to be here when you could take a nap after that amazing lunch, so many things you could do, but I'm really glad that you're here. So I feel like this is a phrase that I use all the time, and we didn't cover that in conducting lessons. Whether it's working lights or trying to fix a soundboard, or what do we do with visual liturgy, how can we use social media worship? These are things that we just, I don't know about you, I never really covered any of that when I was in classes. So I think we have this tremendous opportunity to be ritual artists in this part of the 21st century. There are so many tools and resources that are right at our fingertips. But with that comes a pretty high learning curve on a lot of things. So when I was in school, let me ask you this question. How many of you do some sort of technical work at your church? Sound, video, okay. How many of you work with video or sound people? Okay. It sounds like a subgenre of humans. Technicians, how about that? How many of you work with visual artists? Awesome. All right, now how many of you are just responsible to make sure it gets done somehow? Yeah, okay, I gotcha. One of the best classes I had in my school, in graduate school, come on in, glad you're here, was Introduction to Organ Lessons. So if you're a non-keyboard player, which I certainly qualify as a non-keyboard player, chord chart I can get around a little bit, okay? You're required to take Introduction to Organ. In addition to increasing my love and appreciation for organists and getting enough music to get through one service, which my first church I ended up having to do that, so I was super thankful. The best part of that class for me was being able to learn some of the terminology and the language that organists and organ builders use, so that I could speak with them in a way that had some semblance of using their language. You know, it's like, let's talk about the registration in measure 45 or whatever, maybe it's too thick, or all that sort of thing, to be able to have that kind of terminology, understand what a manual is, was really, really helpful to me for that exact reason of having some common language. And so today, we're going to get, this is like the 30,000 foot overview of worship technology. See, I just went right from my remote. Silly me. Okay, so we're going to talk about basically a theology of technology, talk about the components that make up a sound system, microphones and microphone placement, visual media and projection, some of the different ways in which we work with that, visual liturgy, lighting, and social media. That's a long way to go in an hour, so a lot of this is going to be super entry-level stuff. So all that is to say, continuing education money is really hard to come by these days. So if you go, man, I'm good. If you leave, I will not take it personally. I mean, I will, but I won't tell you. So, okay. So it's your money, so you got to find the right thing for you. So we'll pray and give you a chance to consider. Gracious God, thank you for the gift of this day, for this wonderful lunch that we had, for this conference, for all of these amazing people that are united in the work that we do for you. We are so blessed. Thank you for this time, this opportunity to be together, to remember that we are not alone, that there are other people that share the same struggles and joys that we do, and for the opportunity to love your people and to love you in worship. We give you thanks. Let all of God's people say, Amen. Amen. All right, so just super quick about me. My name is Joe Stobaugh, and I work at Grace Avenue United Methodist Church, which if you got on 35 East and went up about 2 hours and took up the Dallas North Tollway, you would find Grace Avenue United Methodist Church right across the street from FC Dallas's football stadium, soccer if you prefer. And we have, we're a 17-year-old church, and we have 6 different worship services a weekend over 2 venues. So my first 2 months on the job, I had to figure out how we were going to open the new space. They hadn't done any AVL work, they did a little bit of AVL, audiovisual lighting, and then renovate the current contemporary space in 3 weeks. I have a master's degree in choral conducting and sacred music, so it's like, it was an exciting time. I did some work in other places in this kind of in this genre of ministry, but it's really a marvelous thing. So 2 different venues, 6 different services. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about how to make spreadsheets work. That was a sad joke, but we'll move on. All right, so as we're talking about technology, I think it's important to remember why are we doing this? Why would we use any kind of technology in worship for any reason? I think it's because we are the superintendents of God's story in our place. And it is our work to help our people integrate their story into what God is doing in the world. And because we have all these wonderful, vibrant, and fresh ways, it requires of telling the story, of hearing the story, of sharing the story with others. We need a little bit of discernment into the mediums that are available to us. As I said, I think this is a marvelous time, but we've got to be sort of critical about what we're doing. So a word of caution, just because we can do something with technology and worship doesn't mean that we should, unless it serves that wider work of telling God's story, of helping people connect with God, of creating a liminal space for worship. You know, it's like one of my favorite words ever, liminal, yeah? It's that sort of in-between thing, which is exactly where the church is. We're not what we used to be, and we're not yet what we're going to be. We're somewhere in between that time, and that is where the Spirit does its best work. So using technology to help create liminal space is really important. And so I generally tend to go with, especially in areas of sound and projection, that less is more, until more is more. All right? So let's dive right into it, because we have a lot of work to do. So let's talk about sound system components. What is the function of a sound system? Go.
Let people hear the word, let people hear the service.
Yeah, to let people hear, to amplify the sound. Right? That is the core function of what it does, which sounds simple until you start looking at all this stuff. Right? What we're looking to accomplish with sound reinforcement is exactly that, to reinforce the sound that's coming off of the platform of the chancel in order to help people engage with the word, engage with the experience. Right? So the context in which we do this is very, very important. There are some places where good afternoon, welcome. A 40-channel Soundcraft board is going to be the exact right application. There are some places where a 12-channel soundboard is going to be the exact right application. This goes back to the thinking about the context of what we do. In one of the earlier sessions, we talked about the importance of having a decibel meter to be able to have a good information-based talk about context of volume, right? In each place it's different. So, but since we're talking about the technical things, we're going to start looking at basically the signal path from how sound is captured into the mixer and to its components and speakers. Everybody okay so far? All right. All right. This is where it gets, for some of you, this will be super basic. For others, you not. We capture sound in a variety of ways. We'll look at microphones, microphone placements in a minute. But this is kind of to give you some common language. What is this thing right here? XLR cable. That generally runs into microphones. Some guitars, some ukuleles, for example, are starting to have XLR inputs built into them. This would be the male or the female end?
Female.
Very good. All right? Male, female. It goes into the mic, goes into the board. All right? Now, sometimes if we're using like a guitar, for example, we have what's called a 1/4-inch cable. And we've got to get that impedance to change to an XLR level of impedance to get into a soundboard. So that goes into this thing, which they've done a great job just putting the name of it. It's a direct box. And what does it do?
It helps to amplify the guitar acoustic.
Yeah, it changes the impedance to get it to work together. Right, exactly. So we get sources from microphones or DIs, and they go in usually into something that's called a snake. Okay? Snake is a long series of cables that run from the front of the place to wherever your mixer is. Right, and generally those are in junction boxes. So we've got XLR, 1/4-inch, and then sometimes we're seeing now emergence of a lot more folks using headphones, like 3.5 millimeter, as well as in some cases USB. So that can be a little bit of a tricky way to adapt that as they go. It's good so far? Great. So then this is what's called a junction box. You often see this in the floor. This is the middle, we were redoing it, trying to figure out, because we had a ton of contractor difficulty. So I had to figure out which thing went where, which is not a lot of fun. I would not recommend that. Not a good way to spend a Friday night. So that goes into the junction box, which runs into the snake, which generally runs through the floor to the mixer. Or if you're in a studio context, recording studio context, in England they call it a desk or a console. All right. And there's two kinds. There's digital boards and analog boards. How many of you are working with a digital board right now? All right. X32s? Just guessing? Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. Words, okay? Right? And then there's analog, which is sort of the old school. And then there's, they used to be powered by tubes. Some of the really, really nice recording boards still use tubes to power them. And those are powered with what we call solid-state technology. All right, so when the cable comes out of the snake into the board, it goes into, usually somewhere back there, and runs into what's called a channel strip, okay? So this one whole thing here is a channel strip. Now this red button up here, which you'll find this is nearly identical in most boards, the placement, is what we call phantom power. There are some microphones, usually condenser microphones, that require phantom power to work. So if you're having trouble and your sound volunteer, your sound operator is not there, and the microphone's not working, double check one thing, that it's not what we call a ribbon mic, which would be pretty unusual. It could be that the power is not coming from the board back through that snake into the microphone. So for condenser microphones, they will not work without phantom power unless they have their own power. All right? So then you have this red knob. Why do you think it's red?
Oh, that's
Exactly. Danger is kind of like the safety on a firearm, right? Like, so this is the gain knob. This is the master gain. People think it's the faders that make it real loud. That's the tricky one, okay? So unless you have a lot of experience, if you're having to adjust it on your own, start very, very, very small, because you can get to feedback in a hurry with that knob, okay? So then we'll talk a little bit maybe about unity gain. So underneath that, we have these things that are alternated by colors here, so I think that's pretty much so that can be helpful, which is equalization, all right? So on each channel, you can play with the equalization to make it sound better, or to reduce feedback, or to work well in the room in which you're in. All right, so it generally goes highest frequencies to lowest frequencies. You'll see in this particular picture, this is a really, really, really low frequency here. And a lot of times, if you have like a real boomy, woofy sound, and you can't figure out what it is, a lot of it's because the low end is too high. A lot of even boards will have what they call a low cut, which will automatically roll out a lot of low frequencies. Hanging in there? Okay, doing great. All right, then we have auxiliary channels here. And auxiliary channels, generally you can run that sound into what we call aux units that do different things. So for example, in this case, this particular board is set up where these go to stage monitors. All right? So if you need a little bit more bass in one monitor, turn it up, a little less, that sort of thing. Choral monitors is actually really what this board is going to. And then you can send things through compression, through different audio, all that sort of stuff. Hello. Then down here, these brown ones we have what are called pan knobs. Now if you're running a speaker system, which we'll look in a minute, which is in stereo, you can send each channel to which side of the speaker you want it to go to, right? Which is pretty cool if you're running, say, a guitar that's running stereo amplifiers. So you can run one amplifier to the left, one to the right, and when they have effects that bounce back and forth, it will do that in the space. A lot of us are probably running mono, and so in that case, you just leave it straight up and it goes to both, okay? Grand. Now, in the lower half of the board, this is the auxes where we were at before. This is the panning. You have this button, which is a mute button. It does mostly exactly what you think it would do, unless you're running avions. And sometimes, depending on your routing, you can mute it there, but it will still go through the people who have the in-ear monitors. Ask me how I know this. Yeah, let's just say I had to have a little cool down moment between a pianist and a pastor once. I can't believe he just keeps doing that. I'm like, and he did. So that was not fun. All right, so mute buttons, just be mindful. I don't know about you, if you use as when you're up on the platform, I tend to like to control mine myself, which makes some sound people crazy, like the mute on the receiver. But everything from going to the bathroom to, I heard one argument, a pastor and a lay person in the office that was carried out to the congregation because he hadn't muted it. So depending on how you like to roll, I tend to have a little bit of control issues. I tend to do that myself. All right. So then this button here is called a PFL button. You know what that does? Okay, so if you have a headphone output on your mixer, you can put headphones on, you press the PFL button, and it sends only the signal from that channel into your ears. So for example, if I'm mixing a band, there's 3 vocalists, I'll take a moment in the sound check to hit all 3 PFLs, and then I can kind of blend them so we can have a pretty decent sound. So that's a helpful thing. It's a great way to check if, say, a pastor is walking into the room from another service, or a worship leader, you want to make sure their mic is working. The PFL button will send that right to your ears and not out into the house. So you can mute it and still use the PFL. Make sense? Okay.
So does that stand for something?
Yes.
Personal flotation, I don't remember. Yes, it does definitely stands for something. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head. Then you have meters. It's hard to see. There's a red, yellow, and 2 greens. And so what that does is it tells you the amount of output that's coming out of that particular channel. Generally, green to yellow, you're okay. Sometimes even red's okay if it sounds good. You just have to use your ears. So if you're ever mixing or you have someone who's mixing, you generally don't want them on headphones. Right? You want the experience to be the total experience of the organ.
So that's what's coming out of the the thing, the instrument of the singer or whatever, not what's coming out of the board.
Yes, if I understand you correctly. So for example, let's say in channel 14 here, we've got a bass player.
Yeah.
Right? So if I need to hear the bass player, just isolate it.
Yeah.
I'll just hit that,
Yeah.
and it'll
But I
just.
mean the lights. The lights
Oh.
are how loud the bass player is.
That's correct. How much signal
How much is coming into the board?
That's right.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Pre-fade listen.
Pre-fade listen. Thank you. So what that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Right. So what that means is, even if you have this all the way down, these are the faders. If you have it all the way down, it'll still come to you. It's the signal that's coming into the board. It's not altered by EQ or whatever else. Make sense? You can probably alter with EQ. Thank you, sir. I feel like a smarter person today. Great. Okay, and then these are the faders. Right? Now, an important note on the faders, you see here, you probably know it, you can see it, but there is a little extra notch here, line. That is 0. That is what's called unity gain. So the idea being the same amount of source that's coming into the board is also going out to the board, out of the board into the speakers. So that is just kind of generally a good place to start, assuming your gain is not really out of whack. In most cases, probably don't need to go far. Usually you can see why it's weighted the other way, so you can pull things down. I find it's always better to start soft and build your way up, as opposed to the other way around, because our ears get really tired, especially when we're doing this kind of work. So technique-wise, this might be something useful to take home if you have volunteers. There's sort of 2 different schools of thought in my experience for volunteers. So one of the things I tell sound volunteers all the time is that their job is to not be an impediment to the Holy Spirit. That's their work, right? So if the pastor stands up to the mic or a liturgist, blah, 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 because they didn't get the mic turned on, that's an impediment to the Holy Spirit. Feedback and impediment to the Holy Spirit. So I give all AV folks a script of who's speaking when. I think you were saying earlier about it, you put in the music, who's doing what melody and whatever else, in a script for the technical operators to help them. Because unless they have a chance to have a tech rehearsal or a run through, they're having to kind of guess. So there's two different techniques to do this. One is to have everything sort of preset the way it works in a Digital Sunday or Saturday, and then when the children's minister comes up to do a children's moment, unmute them. Another option, which is what I tend to find more professionals do, is they're called riding the faders. So things are unmuted, and then when the person comes out, they just nice and easy bring it back up. So 2 different ways to do it. I find that the riding the faders approach is a little smoother generally, and it also has the added benefit of it requires people to stay engaged in the service. So many of our volunteers, especially our youth, it is not unusual for me to go back and feel like, oh look, we're playing Candy Crush, or thankfully Pokemon Go, they're going to run out of Pokemons to catch them eventually. So that's the channel strip. 2 different mixers. We're talking about digital versus analog. Right? The sound quality in recent years, this is an X32 made by Behringer, and it was called Midas preamps in it. Behringer used to be a brand that everyone said, don't do that, But they have since, a company called Midas, which makes exceptional equipment, has purchased them. I think they're running an X32 in the chapel. I'm guessing because the Wi-Fi keeps coming up X32 chapel. So is that, if that's right?
I think so, yeah.
All right, sweet. It was an educated guess. Okay, so in the very beginning of digital boards, they didn't always sound very good. But the quality has increased so much that I would take, and so this is an Allen and Heath board, which is all analog. For pure sound quality, I would take this Behringer X32 over anything else in its class. It's a $2,100 mixer, and it sounds great. Now, if you've got someone running the sound for you, or an operator who grew up doing it, who's done it for a long time, they're generally going to prefer mixing with one of these because it's all laid out very visually, right? So every channel is nearly the same. Sometimes over here, because this uses a screen, each of these little subsets here, if you press this little button on the side, it puts up the information what's happening on the screen. So it's a different workflow. So if for example, you want to EQ, say, whatever's on this channel here, you got to press the EQ button, and then you use these controls or these controls to EQ it. But over here, you just turn the knob. Yes, sir.
You run around and mix that from an iPad or your phone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, you can take an iPad out and do it all on the fly. I'm short of volunteers Saturday night. We have a Saturday service. And so I'm calling for the offering. I'm just going to be around town, just take it up there with me, call for the offering, look like I know what I'm doing with an iPad, just to make sure nothing blows up, and go back and keep doing it. So that's really handy, especially as you're kind of trying to figure out what your room does acoustically. All right. So the other thing that's really, really helpful about the digital board, if you move something here, it's moved. Here you can record scenes. So for example, in one of the worship spaces, we have 4 different services that run, including the 3 on the normal for the weekend, that service, and then the youth band plays. So we have recorded each scene and each setting, and each one of these little windows here has someone's name in it. All right, so it's Chris plays guitar, this is Chris's guitar, and then it's saved in the memory bank here. So it's super helpful for volunteers. So they can come in, pull up the youth band scene, hit go, everything rearranges here to exactly what that scene is. So it takes out a lot of guesswork. It gets people in the right place pretty quickly. I think that is a very, very, very useful feature with volunteers. Okay, questions so far? You're still awake, it's marvelous. I'm so thankful for you. All right, so let me just say this real quick. All these things we're looking at, compressors, limiters, EQ, a lot of that is already built into digital boards as well. So they have a lot of signal processing power that's already happening. And for example, this particular analog board, we have this extra rack over here that does all kinds of things. Okay. So here we have what's called a compressor limiter. And what a compressor does is it helps smooth out peaks at the low end and the high end of the sound. So I play in one group where I play a lot of kind of funk bass. So I use a lot of compressor because I'm slapping it, popping it, whatever else, and it just smooths it out a little bit. It helps to eliminate the extremes. Really helpful if you've got someone who modulates their voice quite a bit, just smooths things out, rounds it out. A limiter basically keeps you from blowing something up. So if you get an extreme signal pop, the limiter's gonna get to it. Because what happens is mixer to this, to speakers. So if a big, somebody unplugs a guitar or something and the channel's still open, that limiter is going to help knock it down a little bit so you don't tear up your speakers, which is easy to do. Okay. Then we have some extra EQ here that we used. We're in all the main EQ from the board into this, which is equalized for the room. We'll talk about how we can do that in a little bit. And then this, I can't tell you, power conditioners. Yeah? No? Okay, so power conditioners are basically you run all of your gear into them and they regulate the power that's coming to you from the grid. So if you get a spike because something gets hit by lightning, the power conditioner is going to knock that out. Otherwise, it's going to tear up your equipment because it comes straight from the grid into, say, if you just plug the mixer into a wall, you can fry your mixer, light boards, DMX, all that stuff. If you run it through a power conditioner, it's going to save that heartache for you, as well as also helping to kind of keep the power flow. Because power doesn't come smooth all the time. It comes in ebbs and flows and currents and whatever else. So that helps to kind of regulate that. In addition to just in our area, for example, we have so much construction going on around the church right now that we found that they were pumping us 100, I can't keep the numbers exactly right, but roughly 130 volts. And it should be 110 or 120 for a long time. And we kept losing all these stage lights. They weren't plugged into power conditioners when they were installed. So it's just frying stuff. So it's a really, really important way to protect an investment that you've made. We're not going to use Google Drive right now. Sorry about that. Goodness gracious. I think the Wi-Fi is off. That'll do it. All right. Crossovers, what they do is they help determine which particular frequency is going to which speaker. Very few speakers can cover all the different frequencies we need, so it helps to separate that out. Okay, some additional auxiliary components, things like reverb. It is phenomenal the things you can do with reverb these days. Now this definitely comes into a place in a worship setting where less is more. I was doing a recording session with our pianist who did this beautiful album of all sort of like Joel Rainey piano stuff. And so we're sitting there, we get all the recording done, and the engineer says, all right, well, which room do you want it to be in? And it's all these concert halls, legitimate concert halls that have been captured digitally. It's like, do you like the Phillips concert hall and potential not so much? You want Carnegie? So, but if you don't actually live in Carnegie Hall, maybe you don't want that sound. So a little bit goes a long way. Same thing with delay, which basically takes a signal and chops it up in different times. So you can set that generally by milliseconds. You can add, it's called modulation. Give it sort of so that U2 sounds for guitars. Chorus takes a voice and doubles it, and then slightly detunes it a little bit to give the chorus effect. And then flange is a sweepable filter that goes up and down the signal to highlight different sonic frequencies. So unless you're doing like a lot of modern worship, I would probably be kind of let that go a little bit. Yeah.
Are those like extra pieces of equipment?
In analog boards, yes. In the digital board, like the X32, that's all in there. And you can assign it to each individual channel strip or to the whole thing. So it's pretty cool. But it is very easy to go overboard once you learn how to do it. It's the first time cooking. Oh, cayenne pepper's awesome. It goes a long way. All right. Now this is looks way better on my screen than it does on yours, but I didn't have any extra pictures. So we get the signal source. It comes into the mixer, goes through the auxiliary components, out to the speakers. There's basically three primary speaker placements that are used in worship. The most common one is we call it center cluster. So if you're to come into Grace Avenue, this is the center cluster. It's a mono signal, which like back in the 50s up into the early 60s, for example, if you've never heard the Beatles in mono, it's a totally different experience as in stereo. It's actually way better, way better, because it was mixed to work mono. So this is really nice because it centralizes speaking sources. It sounds more natural often, but you don't get stereo effects, right? So that's what's called the center cluster. Then we have what we're called line arrays, which you see at concerts a lot. So it's really hard to see, and I apologize for that. There's two speakers that are hung here, and two that are hung here, and then a sub in the middle. So remember that panning control we talked about? So if I wanted to say to create an illusion of a sonic space, that's what they do in recording, I could say put the bass player standing here, I could put just a little bit more bass in this speaker. The guitar player is over here, I can put a little more guitar in that way so it lines up with what you see. Also, if you're using effects, you can bounce delays back and forth between the two arrays, which is a marvelous effect. But if you don't do that a lot, I would probably just kind of let that go. It's kind of a natural thing. And then there's also distributed systems. You see this in a lot of cathedrals and churches that have speakers in pews or whatever, and so they're timed out to account for the delay in the room, primarily used for speaking. Cool. There's also another thing to consider: how do you power the speakers? So there's two different ways of doing it. There's internally powered speakers that have the amplifier built into them. So the ones that you saw, like for example, this is a sub. It's internally powered, so the amplifier is inside of it, which is like usually pretty great unless something goes wrong, and then you have to get a lift and go up and look at it. And lift prices are like $500 to $600 a day. Then in the center cluster we saw, in the bottom of this rack here, you can see this is called a power amplifier, and it sends the power up to the speakers. So if you have an amplifier go out, this is a little bit easier way for your tech to work on it, right? Then of course they have to be connected somehow to the back of the board to get the sound out. There's two primary ways in which speakers are connected. One is with a 1/4-inch speaker cable, right? And the other is what's called a speak-on cable, which goes in and kind of twists a little bit to lock in. Now, sometimes there's guitar cables, instrument cables, that are 1/4-inch, and speaker cables that are 1/4-inch. They don't like each other. So if you're in a pinch, you can use the guitar cable, but it's not going to sound real good. It'll be okay, but they carry different loads of signal. The speaker cable is generally going to have a lot kind of beefier ability to do that. So just a word on that. Now I'll talk a little bit about monitoring in a contemporary context or in a traditional context where you're really spread out. For many years, the main way this is done in modern worship was through what we call floor wedges, which are speakers that are on the floor and angled to come back to the musician. So, for example, we saw that auxiliary piece, those yellow knobs on the board. I could be playing guitar and say, hey, can I get just a little bit more of a kick drum? And, yeah, sure. So it would just come to whatever chain that monitor is on, as opposed to the house. Good so far? The challenge with that is, if you're running a lot of wedges, it's easy to get into what we call monitor wars. Somebody comes in with a sinus infection or allergies, they can't hear real well, and could you turn up a little bit more keys? Oh yeah, sure. And then the person who's over here suddenly is having to contend with all these keys, but this bass player say they need to hear the kick drum. Could you turn the kick drum up a little bit? Oh yeah, sure. And then on and on and on and on until, sometimes this happens frequently actually, if you're just using wedges, the sound, the volume that's coming out of the wedges is louder than what's coming out of the front of the house, either that center cluster or the line array. So there's, the main trick here is to, if you're just using wedges, is to empower the front of house engineer to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you today. And oh, man, musicians hate that. But if we don't, it becomes this huge impediment to congregational singing. It doesn't mix well, and it tires people out. Bad acoustical environments make people tired. They leave the service. They can't tell you why, but it's because their ears are working so hard to sort through all of the sound. A secondary solution that's been really popular in the last few years are what's called IEMs, or in-ear monitors. And they are marvelous for a lot of reasons. One, if everyone's using IEMs, all those wedges don't have to be there anymore. They get to go away, the stage looks cleaner, the platform looks better. There's little boxes, Avion boxes, or Behringer, or Yamaha, pick your flavor, and you can plug your ears into it, and then you have, in most cases, 16 channels, and you get to decide what you want in your mix. And then you can save it, come back the next week, pull it up, you've got the same thing. It's great. I use IEMs quite a bit, and they're really, really helpful for hearing loss as well. Because if you get like I have custom fit ones, which are expensive, but you can't replace your hearing. when it's gone, it's gone. And wedges are notorious for really hurting people's ears over extended exposure to it. So they're great, especially if you've got a drummer who's playing in an isolation booth. They have to have it because they can't hear what's happening out in the world. But there's a theological problem for me using IEMs for the worship leader or for the song leader without a little bit of work. I really believe, like for choir, for the church, what's the biggest choir? Congregation. In a contemporary context, the congregation is the fifth member of the band, if you will. So if we're leading as song leaders, if we can't hear the congregation, that's a problem. Okay? Now, some companies are offering IEMs where they'll drill ambient ports into the earpiece itself, so you can hear the ambient sound, which is a nice way to do that. Some leaders will lead it with either one out or one in, and that there's long-term research is beginning to show that there's long-term hearing damage that can be done that way because your other ear is compensating so much for it. Some folks will crack it just a little bit. I've done all these things. And then others, we have, for example, one of our services, we have a hybrid system. So all the instrumentalists are on in-ears, but the song leader and the vocalist are using wedges, but they're just turned out a ton, so they can still hear the people. I think that is just essential. Because our biggest, most wonderful subversive opportunity in worship is to help turn people from consumers to creators. So we got to do that in a partnership, okay? And then there's hotspots. You've probably seen these little boxes like this big. They're little powered monitors that you can run something straight out of the board or out of the snake into a little powered monitor, and they're great just for that exact purpose. It's a lot of pianists would use them if they need to hear instrumentals on the other side of the chancel or what have you. They're a nice little feature. They're not usually kind of as overpowering as a floor wedge would be, and a little visual less intrusive. Essential accessories for the sound area. A cable tester. They're like $30. Behringer makes one, and you can plug in a cable and know if it's bad or not. Just helps problem solve. 9-volt and AA batteries. We just buy gigantic 600 count boxes of 9 volts from Interstate. Just because dead battery is no fun. That's an impediment to the spirit. You know? Plus they can be recycled. 9 volts, a lot of guitar players, older guitars will use 9 volts guitar pedals. Cable ties and Velcro. So you can Velcro up your cables when you're not using them. And in an emergency, if you've got a bad cable, you're not having to do like giant spaghetti untangling. Right? Scissors. You always need a good pair of scissors. Because that usually goes if you're using an analog board tape, which is a special kind of tape that's on guitar standards. You can run across the bottom of your board and write in Sharpie what is on each channel. And if you've got a lot of volunteers, that can be really helpful.
Have you seen the fluorescent? It's fluorescent. There's a fluorescent brand. So if you
Really?
got a dark booth, then
Oh, no, I haven't seen that. That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
Duct tape, you mean?
yeah, or that board tape.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a dark booth.
Sure.
And you're looking for a,
Oh my gosh, yeah, you're having to like pull out your phone flashlight.
I saw it on Amazon, I mean, everything's on
That's
Amazon.
awesome. You know when that would be the best? Christmas Eve candlelight service. Oh my gosh, it's always like, we all have stories, I'm sure. Then screwdrivers, just in case you need to take something apart or tighten something. A lot of times, like a microphone input will come loose, a little quick tighten, you're good. Okay, let's get to the really fun stuff in sound world. Microphones. If you get into this, you can become like a microphone junkie. All right, so we'll talk about different kinds of mics and microphone placement, as well as wired versus wireless mics. Pretty simple distinction there. However, if you have older wireless microphones, you might need to just kind of check in with them, because the FCC has outlawed certain frequencies, which I don't know if they go looking for these things, but we had an older pre-FCC change microphone, and we're near a CareFlight helicopter station. Sure enough, middle of service, CareFlight helicopter comes on, and we're getting like radio instructions through that microphone channel. So just be aware of that. You don't necessarily want that. CareFlight's confusing. Okay, so different kinds of microphones. There are dynamic microphones. The SM5758 are two of the gold standards, and those are generally microphones that you put near your face, designed for one person. I was at an event a couple months ago, and I heard a sound guy say something about dynamic microphones. I thought, that is really crude, but great. He's just talking to someone who's saying, if you can't lick it, we can't hear it. that's actually a pretty good word. So those are kind of microphones that are designed to be close to you or to the sound source. All right. And then we have condenser microphones, which come in three brands: a large diaphragm, medium diaphragm, what we call pencil mics. And those use phantom power, that red button at the very top. So those are great for pianos, choral ensembles, that sort of thing. And if you're doing like a reading with 3 or 4 different people, you can gather them around one condenser mic and you'll be good to go usually. Ribbon microphones, which are coming back in vogue. Notice that the original microphones had aluminum ribbons that went through them, and they're really, really nice sounding. The good ones are very warm. But if you use phantom power, generally you'll blow up the ribbon. So that is a challenge. So before you check for phantom power, that's the problem. Just look at your microphone and make sure they have an R on it, because the good ones are not cheap. Then a lavalier microphone, the guy that comes here, when you put it on a lapel usually, or a Countryman, just kind of a brand name that comes over the ear and towards the mouth. And then boundary microphones, or pressurized zone microphones. I have that one. So these are dynamic microphones. These are sort of industry standard. That's an SM57, which for 20 or 30 years was the microphone that they would use for the president on the traveling podium, because they are real close to indestructible. I saw a guy knock a door handle off once with it, put it back on, and it was fine. So they're really good. John Lennon would only sing in the studio, in this one particular studio in New York, through one particular SM57. So they're okay for vocals. Good enough for John Lennon, probably okay for the rest of us. But they have a very narrow pattern. So you can have an SM57 like right here, and it won't pick you up hardly. So they're really good for guitars, guitar cabinets, drums, some bass cabinets, horns use SM57s, and this is an SM58, which is a little bit different shape of capsule. There's a capsule that's inside these things, and that's what picks that. That's why you don't want to tap on microphones, this thing on, because it causes the capsule to vibrate. And if you tap it hard enough, you can break it. All right, so that's generally used for vocal mics. Industry standards there. Then we have condenser microphones. So for example, can you tell which one's the ribbon and which one's the condenser? They look almost exactly the same, right? You just need to look, there's a little R on this one, that's a ribbon microphone. But that's a large diaphragm condenser. You generally don't use those too often. AKG makes a really nice one called the 414 that sounds great on pianos overhead for drums. But those are like $1,000 a mic. So you don't come across those too often, because you know how church is. Right, then we have, I gotta speed this up. We get till 3:45, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, cool. So these are what we call pencil mics. This is an Audio Technica Pro 37, and they work great for choirs, small ensembles. They use these for children's choirs, as well as for pianos. Okay, and then obviously a PZM mic. You see that a lot in musical theater, as well as piano mics. And then that's a Countryman. All right. So we talked a little bit about using the dynamic microphones for individual things like scripture readings if they're close, or condensers for smaller group dynamics. Cool. Miking a piano, one of the hardest things to do to make it sound natural. Pianos are notoriously hard to mic well. I found that this little Pro 37 combo, and we call it XY position, where it's split out like this, can be a really nice sound, and those are not very expensive microphones in the wide world. Often you'll find little ribbons that go across the soundboard. Those are really good in a contemporary setting, but for a natural and traditional hymns, they don't work so well. Drums, you can get away with one overhead and one bass drum mic and still get a great sound. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, sure.
Is that piano mic is inside the piano, right?
It's on a stand, so you can't, kind of hard to see here. So
Oh,
it
it's
stays
in
on the
a
outside.
stand.
Auxillary.
So our guys put it underneath.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely get a lot of soundboard that way. It's a lot of like experimentation and sort of mixed to taste, depending on what you have. That's probably the most fun thing about microphones is you all are musicians. You have really good ears. Move it around until it sounds right to you. Because we all have lots of time to mess with microphones all day, right? I know better. Obligato instruments, the SM57 or pencil mic condenser, those work really well. We're going to switch over to visual media now. Are you still hanging in there? A word on projection and bulletins and hymnals. They can all coexist. These things don't need to be mutually exclusive. One of the biggest challenges I think we have for people who use projection is they just treat it like it's a giant bulletin, which is not the most optimal use of technology. So for example, in our traditional services, everybody's got a bulletin, a hymnal, and we still use projection, but not only for like a large word processor, right? So there's two different, this is kind of some of the things that we'll look at briefly. HD versus SD, widescreen versus box, if you will. It's called triple wide. Anybody using triple wide environmental projection? Do you know what that is? Oh my gosh, this is the greatest. All right, some different projection software. And there's this really cool thing called the Shift Media app, which allows you to take pictures from your phone, and then you can, on the phone, you can edit it, and then put it in whatever kind of format you have. So whether it's SD, HD, triple wide, regular, and then email it to yourself, and it will show up on, you can put it on your computer. It's a marvelous thing to, like, for example, take a picture of a visual art installation in your church, and then to project that. It helps the space feel much more congruent. All right, so HD versus SD. Now we generally go with, you see TVs are wider. Back when they used to be 4:3 with standard definition. High definition is 16:9. So that's a lot of, sort of, when people were just getting into projection, it was 4:3. It has since changed primarily to 16:9. That's all the math there is for today. All right, triple wide, what we call environmental projection. So I told you about that 3 weeks I had to turn that space around. This is what it looked like before. It was in a corner, kind of dark. With triple wide, see, you've got two computers here. So in this space, we use 5 projectors. One's called a confidence projector, so it puts lyrics and whatever's on what we call the overlay for the people on the chancel to see, so they know it's happening. And that runs out of one computer. And then we have another computer that runs what we call the triple wide. So you have to get a piece of equipment called the triple wide head, and it distributes an image to multiple projectors. In this case, 3 different projectors. And it syncs them up so that this is about a 75-foot long wall here, one image all the way across, no screens, because the color of the paint works just fine. It's an incredible way to change your environment quickly, subtly, beautifully if used well, garishly if not, but it is a game changer as far as setting a worship atmosphere.
Did you change out the walls?
Nope. Environmental projection is designed to be
No,
for...
but we're,
So
there's
show
nowhere
me
in the
your
top
I'm looking at
picture.
the top.
It's hard to see, so like this area right here, these
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is this here. So we just reoriented the space.
What about the people that are sitting over on that side?
Well,
To your right.
we reoriented the chairs as well. So it's all, instead of being an angle,
Oh, okay.
you got it. Which has made some interesting sound things. We have standing wave issues and we were supposed to have more money. Never mind, that's a long story. So it can be a really, really powerful, beautiful thing. There's a man named Cameron Ware who is at the forefront of this study. He lives in Irving, Texas. And if this is something you ever want to kind of talk about, let me know and I will connect you with him. It's not inexpensive, but it is a game changer for environments. It can be used in any kind of environment. Like in Disney, they use a lot of environmental projection on the walls outside of things because you can paint with it basically. All right, so that Shift Media app we talked a little bit about. I can take a picture of this altar here, put it in HD, and in 2 minutes have it up here. Think of the fun you could have with your youth and smartphones. All right. Projection software, there's Media Shout, Easy Worship, ProPresenter, Keynote, Extended PowerPoint. I find ProPresenter to be sort of the gold standard. It integrates very well with triple wide. The Bible resources on there, like you name your translation, you can get it. It's really, really easy, super user friendly. A word on copyright. Yes.
So back to the triple wide thing.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, I'm flying over that pretty fast.
so you don't use screens at all then? You
Right.
project onto the wall?
Yep.
But is there any, okay, and you said that it sends 3 cameras have the image.
Mm-hmm.
That's to
Projectors,
make
yeah.
it real wide,
Right.
right? Can you do it with 2 cameras? I mean, you
Yeah.
have to have at least 3?
No, you can do two.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's just a matter of getting the image to sync up and then spending some time making sure it works correctly on the side. So for example, you can see here, there's ways you can mask. So you could mask, like here's a good example. We are able to just spend a little bit of time editing it so the image doesn't get on these architectural features. So it just
Yeah.
makes it look cleaner.
Yeah.
It's really, really tremendous.
That's cool, that'd be neat.
What do we need to have for copyright on a slide just to be legal? In projection, you just have to have it on one slide per song, but you have to have the song title, writer's credits, copyright, CCLI, or one license if you're using one license, at least one time per song. So as we kind of speed up here, we got 15 more minutes, but if I blow through something, you're like, I want to know more about that, I'll be glad to email this to you, and then we can kind of talk, and because I tend to be sort of, anyway. Very good so far? I appreciate you hanging in there. Let's talk a little bit about how to integrate visual liturgy, visual work of the people. If you work with visual artists, it's really important, I just think it's important any which way. With the Reformation, we sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater as far as things that are visual in our churches, but we're really beginning to see a lot of reclamation of that. So for example, when I'm looking at a service that's about Lent, we're entering into Lent. That's, depending on the themes, general Lenten themes, there's a particular kind of set of colors that really express that, right? So as visual artists, in our case, they do a wonderful job of creating a visual worship display. But if what's happening on the 70-foot screen is incongruous with that, well, it keeps people from entering into the worship in a really, probably wasn't something I said. Thanks for coming. Sorry, okay, I'm just kidding. Take care. Good to see you. So just being mindful of that. So part of our worship design timeline, I schedule a meeting with visual artists and with people who do the media to talk about what kind of palette are we going to use here. Everything from what matches with the stoles to what's on the bulletin to just being really mindful of creating a unified vibe. For example, a lot of times people are tempted to put, when they do a scripture reading, to put the scripture reading up on the screen. Okay, we do that, and I'm still trying to get people out of it, because what if they're using the wrong translation? Or what if they don't, they mispronounce Theophilus? Everyone's going, I don't think that's how you say it. That works, and they're using can be challenging. A better use of technology in this way is to think, what are 2 or 3 images that express what the scripture reading is doing? So then we're engaging multiple senses. They're hearing the story, which is primarily an orally spread tradition, and then having anchor images, or images that help us kind of begin to get the double layers and the extra layers of meaning, right? Other ways to do this is to take photographs of visual installation, or if you're trying to kind of figure out what to do with the screen in a place where people are like, I know we need one, but I really don't want it. You can take pictures of glass or things that are stained glass or things that are already in there and project them up as well to make it feel like a much more unified space. Right? And the challenge, as I said earlier, is to really think of beyond projection, is beyond it being a really big bulletin, right? I mean, if we have bulletins, we probably don't need a really big one. Now, I'm all for projecting song lyrics. I think it can be very, very helpful. And a website I want to kind of hit you to, if you don't know this already, is theworkofthepeople.com. Have you ever used their work? It's amazing, right? So they have visual liturgy, they've got loops that you can use, some
Do you
phenomenal...
find the quality to be acceptable?
So it's kind of my aesthetic. So I like it. Now there's some things that are so rough I can't use, but I kind of like the grainy thing because it feels a little more organic, but I think it's kind of a...
Hear the people.
Some of
There's a big do of ambient.
Yeah, some of the interviews are not really usable, but a lot of them are really, really tremendous. So I encourage you to check that out. And they've got interviews with Parker Palmer and Brueggemann. It's really a phenomenal resource. Okay, let's switch over to lighting a little bit. And the same idea as color palettes we were talking earlier. or visual liturgy or projection, we can also create spaces in new ways with lighting. One of my favorite services of the year is Baptism of the Lord. There is so much to be done there. So many beautiful, creative opportunities. So for example, when I have the right kind of time, I will ring the room in blue light. Do some washes. I mean, you can go to Home Depot and get one of those garage lights and get a party, they're sort of the metal kind of like this. Get some of those party color lights, get blue, wrap it around so it looks nice, you automatically get a blue wash. I'm not so great at colors, but I know blue and red makes purple. So blue and red, tilt them together until they're the color you want. Easy and inexpensive. But for example, in a Baptism of the Lord service, you come in, the room is surrounded in blue light. What's your first thought?
Water.
Right. It's almost like you're entering into a baptismal font. I stole an idea from a marvelous person. Actually, I'm going to commend her book to you in a minute. But we ended up putting a baptismal font on a piece of glass, and the font was clear, and then uplighting it under the glass. So you got this beautiful watery image on the top, on the ceiling. It's deeply immersive. How do we create environments that immerse people, in this case figuratively, in what we're doing? Right? So tremendous opportunity there. So lighting boards, power cans versus LED, uplighting, all that stuff. You guys are doing great. So this is a very, very basic light board. And to be honest, this is like the weakest part of my game. As far as there was this called a DMX connection. You can run all sorts of different lights into it and then program scenes into the board. So much like a soundboard, you can mix the different colors, the different kinds of lights this way. And then like in this particular board, and this is pretty old school, we set different scenes. So for example, in our particular case now, in one of the worship centers, the band is on the left. So when the band is going, we've got a light on the cross and a little bit more light on the band. And then we've got it to where it transitions when the pastor comes up to help people kind of guide their focus. That's another thing that can really help move people through the liturgy. Right? Power cans versus LED cans. So you can see this sort of like really bright yellowish, we call it sort of incandescent light, right? That comes out of old theater power cans, which are great. They're super bright. They're sort of a little bit like yellowish tinge, but it's what most of us would consider sort of normative light. They produce a ton of heat. They're not energy efficient, and you got to change out the light bulbs. Now, improving technology in this sort of blue here is what we call an LED light. And they're now making LEDs that can kind of cop an iridescent look. They're a little more expensive, but in what we would pay to change out the bulbs into service power cans, the LED is, if you can afford it, is the way to go. Now in some LEDs you can mix red, green, and blue to taste to sort of simulate that. But I mean I forget the exact number of hours they'll go, but they will go forever without needing to be changed. They don't produce a lot of heat. You can put them on the floor for uplighting, and you don't have to worry about shoulder attachment, because if they do, it's not going to hurt them. So that technology continues to just get bigger and bigger and bolder and more wonderful and less expensive. So if you get to a place where you're getting ready to change out lights, I would really encourage you to think about moving over to LED. And they also draw a lot less power, which is better for your bills and better for the environment. Right? And we talked a little bit, for example, using that baptismal liturgy piece of uplighting and accent lighting. It's really a helpful technique that you can use to draw attention to different places, to warm up spaces. We've got, in one portion of the church, we sort of really call it a coffin corner, because it's just dark. There's nothing good happening there visually. It's kind of creepy. So what we did is we've turned it into a prayer station area. So we've got tables of candles, and then a particular activity to do, and then we've uplit that corner. So what went from a really dark, pretty much useless corner is now a really beautiful, well-lit, ambient place for prayer. And it costs next to nothing to do. So just being mindful of how we can maximize some of the spaces that we have. So, I mean, you can kind of see it's in this space actually, and see how dark that is? And like I wouldn't want my 7-year-old to go over there. It's terrifying. It's not terrifying.
Have you seen those hue lights?
Hmm?
Hue lights?
Tell me about those.
They're you can program them to whatever color you want.
Oh yeah.
Whatever, you can match it to this shirt or
Hmm.
anything. They're Wi-Fi, and you
Oh,
can
cool.
use them off your iPad.
Isn't it a great time to be alive? That is super cool. Yeah, so mix it to taste. If you're it's Christmas, you're Advent, you go a little blue, Lent, mixes in purple. Purple LEDs look the best anyway. Purple's a great color. Awesome.
Is there a place where you go to for lighting?
Usually a couple different places. B&H video is good. I'm trying to think if I've ordered a lot of sound stuff through Sweetwater. I would imagine they do lights too. But do they?
Yes.
Yeah. The people at Sweetwater are amazing. Sweetwater.com, get your own personal sales rep. I don't know if yours does this. Mine sends me candy with orders. It's really nice. It's very thoughtful. They're great customer service. They will do anything for you in a heartbeat. I would really commend. Has that been your experience? Yeah, I would really commend Sweetwater, Sweetwater.com for all of your needs. And they don't even pay me to say that. All right, incorporating social media, a whole new paradigm. In ProPresenter, software we were talking about earlier, there's actually a Twitter integration feature where you set a particular hashtag and whoever's operating the software can choose which things to put up on the screen, which is really important, as you can imagine. We was at a district conference meeting once. We had a particular hashtag. We were using it, and then it started getting all these weird things on the screen. This is back during the Arab Spring. We realized that the hashtag that we were using was also the Libyan rebels hashtag. So we were getting like tanks at the corner of whatever. We're like, we're going to go ahead and switch ours because no one's shooting at us today. So having that ability to monitor what goes on the screen and it works pretty well in my experience. So if you've got, say, a worship series around questions of the faith, to allow people to ask those questions via Twitter, via text message, is a neat way of doing that. We've done some services as well where we send people out into the world. It's a little easier with a smaller gathering with Instagram and say, all right, go take pictures of whatever the thing would be. Send them out for 20 minutes, or go talk to someone about what is their hopes and dreams. And the sky's the limit. And then you can pull that up if you have internet connection. You can pull that up and project what people have done on the screen. A different kind of way of thinking about what is the work of the people. Or imagine how we could move our worship, and this is such a key thing for us, our worship to continue it from what we do in the church out into the world. If you've got a clearly defined theme of what you're working on, encourage your people. DeWitt Jones, National Geographic photographer, this whole thing about celebrate what's right with the world. So we had a worship series about that theme. How do we, in the midst of all the blah of life, which we totally need to acknowledge, we also have to acknowledge that we do live in a pretty remarkable time. And so we send people out to say, all right, hashtag celebrate what's right with the world. And then we can take those things, put them in a package, and then say, as people are coming into the service the next week, you can see what people are celebrating out in the world. How do we bridge that gap between the walls of the church and out into the world? Lots of different ways to do that. You can send out weekly emails saying, oh, look at this. Ways in which we can highlight what we're doing and keep the theme in people's mind. So when in doubt, Google, YouTube, almost all this stuff is a lot easier to find these days. Okay, that was the 30,000-foot overview of technology and worship. I hope you're unscarred. I would say the great joy of all this is putting it together. And a dear friend of mine, who I think is the guru of multi-sensory worship, is a woman named Marcia McPhee. You know Marcia? You need to know Marcia McPhee. She has just put out a new book that, based on a lecture series that she does called Think Like a Filmmaker, Sensory-Rich Worship Design for Unforgettable Messages. And this just came out, and I think it is absolutely a masterpiece in moving us into new ways of thinking. How do we think cinematically what we're doing? And she has chapters for musicians, for visual artists, for tech people, and how do we improve our game in what we're doing and create really some unforgettable services.
What's her last name?
McPhee, M-C-E,
McPhee.
Yeah, F-E-E. It just came out a couple weeks ago, and I've sat through this workshop that she does about like a filmmaker literally 6 times. It's the best thing I've ever been a part of. I come away with something new every single time. So I would just commend this to you as something to kind of check out and to start thinking bigger picture and creatively. This is the playbook. This in a book by a good Baptist named Mark Pearson called The Art of Curating Worship. That's also really strong. So those things are in that bibliography. Well, I can't keep you from Dr. Pepper floats. What a marvelous tradition. Thank you all so much. I thank you for your ministry out in the world. What you do matters. I hope you know that. It's easy to forget it, but you are changing people's lives and doing the good work of God. So thank you so much.